Hi, welcome back to another real estate market update for the Columbus, Ohio real estate market. I'm Ryan Deeter with Key Realty, and we are diving into December numbers for 2023. We now have the full year picture for 23, so we can put that to rest and look into what's going to happen in 24. If you haven't seen the full market forecast that I produced a few weeks ago, please go check that out in the YouTube page as well. It's a little bit longer of a video, and it dives into all my stats and market update for the whole year. As I make a prediction what's going to happen in 24, but today's going to be a little bit shorter, and we're going to look at the full year of last year, at least look at December's numbers to kind of recap the year and kind of give us a picture of what's going to happen in 24. So here we go. All right, here are the 23 December numbers pulled up for us that the Columbus Board of Realtors produces for us monthly. And as you can see, again, just a reminder, this is for the Columbus region. So if you're looking at a particular area, it's going to be a little different. They do produce numbers for areas and a lot of school districts, stuff like that too. So I encourage you, if you're in an area, to dive into those numbers yourself, or I'm happy to do it with you. So with that said, let's look at the region, and let's look at the this month being December. We now have the full year numbers, so we can kind of look at the end of the year and see where we landed. And again, the big story all year was inventory shortage. There wasn't as many sales going on, and we can see we ended up 13% less than last year. And looking at last year, even, this is where it's crazy, because we saw 14%, so almost the same amount of number of the year before. So sorry, this is just November. Let's look at December 22. Sorry, about 12%. So very similar numbers still. Numbers down. And so not only were we down last year, we're down again this year. And this is where last year wasn't, anything to really, celebrate in a number when it comes to number of closings, because, we had very low numbers last year as well. And they're even lower this year. So that's been the story all year. It's just been like, hey, there's the two main storylines are interest rates were higher, high as they ever been this last year. And then their inventory is lower, and almost low as it's ever been. So what that has done is almost still balanced the market, where it cooled it off some, but it also didn't allow prices to drop too far, because there were still enough buyers out there for the amount of inventory. So that's where kind of the main story, if I had to recap, the two main storylines, that's it. So looking at the numbers, though, December, we actually had a pretty strong December compared to last year. This is November still. Let's get back to December. There we go. A pretty strong December compared to last year. As you can see, these numbers, are better than what the year to date was. So this kind of really helped us, bolster the end of the year, and we saw kind of a strong, really, kind of fall. And I say quote unquote stronger than it was at the beginning of the year compared to the year before. And so we saw December come in fairly strong. We're at 8 and 7, and 10% on these average square foot, average sell price, median sell price, and then average price square foot. If you've watched these videos, I like to look at that as holistically as to where the market's going. If one number is high and the other number is low, we're going to look at why that is. Sometimes we see, really big homes selling just, for whatever reason, and then the average price is down. So you don't want to, see an anomaly like that, or we see the opposite, where a lot of smaller homes are selling, but the average price, would then go up for the most part. So anyway, so we're seeing a pretty consistent number there, within a couple percentage. And so you can see at the end of the year, we landed right about that 5% average price increase, 4% in the median, and 5% on the average price per square foot. So let's just call it about 5% growth, which really is the average across the history of the market. So we kind of have what we consider an average year. That's coming off, though, of really strong years in the last 3 years. So last year we came in at double digits, in December, and this year we saw just 5%, which is kind of feels like it's like slowed down. A lot of people feel like it's a buyer's market now, but that's not really the case still, in a sense. In most areas of Columbus, it just has slowed down again and got back to an average, good average growth, but it's still, because of the supply, there's still, in my opinion, more demand than there is supply in a lot of areas of Columbus. That's not the case, and that's what we're seeing is actually it's really neighborhood to neighborhood right now. And you got to be, understanding your individual neighborhood more than we have in the last few years. The last few years, you kind of just look at Columbus and see where it's going and say, oh yeah, everywhere in Columbus is going up and to the right. We can just buy anywhere and be okay. Now you got to be a little bit more careful of what's going on in an area. How many listings are there in your area? How much supply is there versus, the demand? And so that's a really important factor to look at right now, more than it has been, at least in the last 5 years or so. So last thing, again, going back to like, where are we going in the future? Where is 24 going? And there's a couple of things I want to point out just to show that. And so we did see, a little increase in contracts, which I think we had a pretty, in my opinion, we had a pretty, a lot of agents talk about having a pretty good December. Actually, I heard a lot of people say they had one of the better Decembers they've had in a while. And it's because this is, kind of showing that we saw a little increase in contracts. The thing that we did see also is the new listings drop. So we saw less new listings. November, we actually saw this is something to keep a little eye on. I was looking at. We also saw a little bump in new listings compared to last year. So we saw in November, we saw new listings hit, but we saw, that probably helped with the in contracts. We saw some more houses hit the market that maybe buyers were waiting for. They got in contract, but now we see that inventory has been, taken. It's in contract, and we saw less hit the market this month. So that means that the inventory has, the total supply has, again gone back down, and I'm not seeing a ton of new inventory hit the market where buyers are excited about right now. And so with that said, we're into the year above, this is, we do have more inventory this time than we did last year. But a lot of that inventory, again, is a lot of inventory that's either overpriced or just not, what buyers are looking for. So we're seeing a lot of homes sit on the market a little longer because of that. And but if you hit the market right, you still are, when I say right, hit the market the right price point that buyers are looking for, we still are seeing homes sell quick. So that's the key. We're seeing a little uptick in days on market, but not a ton, just one day really. So we're seeing a little uptick in supply, but not a ton. Let's look at last year where we were this time last year. We saw a little bit uptick. Yeah, so we said such little supply the year before in 21. We saw, 50 over almost a 60% bump, but that doesn't, it doesn't, when you're at 0.7 and you get to 1.1, 50%, 60% bump in inventory would sound like a flood of inventory. But when you're so low, that really doesn't make a huge dent in the market. It helps, but not a huge dent. And so, going kind of the same story here, going from 1.1 to 1.4, it's a little noticeable, but not a ton to buyers. So there's not a ton, not the buyers aren't seeing a ton of options right now, especially in the desirable areas they want to be in. We're seeing some areas be saturated with some listings, and some areas kind of be deserts where things just, there's just hardly anything. One, two, three listings almost for a whole area, whole community. So that's and desire. Those are typically the desirable areas too that have probably more buyers waiting for the right house to hit the market. So, anyways, that's kind of what my big takeaway is. One thing I do want to kind of point out as we look into the future is where interest rates are going. I want to focus on that here, and this is a good little tool. Mortgage News Daily it has a great app, but also a great website that kind of shows a lot of neat data for us. So this is their chart that I like to look at when it comes to what are buyers doing? What's the demand doing? And so we look at supply, then we'll look at demand, and you can see. I think I got this last year. So this is the snapshot of last year in that same chart. This is just a zoomed in from January 23 to January 24, and I actually left it out a month late, November, because I want to show you last year what happened this time of year is that we saw interest rates come down. They were in the sevens and came down to close to 6, and we saw with that the blue line. Then this blue line is a chart of mortgage applications, people who are applying for either are applying for pre-approvals, essentially. So with that said, we see that correlation of the interest rates dip down, the amount of buyers, increase. And we saw this, and we saw a pretty strong December last year. January of last year. So if we look at this is the January of last year. This chart here shows us from the really the cycles of the Columbus market and the seasons. And so we saw last year. This is last year. This is January. We saw a huge spike in the spring, came down, and we saw January actually is when things started to ramp up a little bit. Started going on the increase. Where we started seeing month to month appreciation versus month to month depreciation, which we see every fall and winter. We start seeing prices come down, and then spring hits and starts to come up. Usually it takes a month or two. You can see, sometimes it hits January, sometimes it's delayed, but we saw a pretty spike in January and just kept going. And what's interesting this year is if you zoom in here, you can see that December actually kind of flatlined. And so I think we're going to have a pretty strong January as well. And this is because of all those end contracts that happened in January are going to start, closing here sorry, all the end contracts in December are going to start closing in January. And we'll see if those numbers actually reflect a higher price point than they did in December. So something to keep an eye on. I think where things are going. We did going back to this chart. Oh, let's go zoom in. This chart here, you saw interest rates were in the high sevens, and they came down pretty. Not this looks like a really quick drop. It's a whole almost percent, which is a big deal for a buyer. And you can see there was a little spike in mortgage applications. So will we see more buyers entering the market? Will we see this trend continue to go up and to the right as well, and see more buyers into the market, more, causing more demand for the houses that come on the market? My prediction is that we'll start seeing a little bit of both. We'll start seeing some buyer or sellers that have been waiting to sell their house. They don't want to sell in the winter. A lot of buyers that are waiting because they're just, for whatever reason, life change, they want to sell. They're tired of waiting for the economics to be right. So we're going to see a little bit more inventory this spring. But I also think we're going to see buyer demand and kind of meet that supply and kind of, again, be a more neutral market like we saw this last year when it comes to growth, a more average growth market compared to this year, until those rates really get back down in the fives, to low fives. Then we'll start seeing that higher growth for Columbus regions. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you found this video helpful. And if you did, please subscribe or leave some feedback, even ask some questions, as I'd love to hear from you, and some content that you may want to hear, or questions you may have as well. And so leave that in the comments and I'll be happy to reply. If you have any other questions you'd like to reach out for, please feel free to reach out. Thanks again.